I'm Alan, and today we start with a new book from the Bible, that's Exodus. This is going to be a really interesting book. The reason being, this is the beginning of a long journey from one suffering to another. It's like life, right? Things go uphill and they come down. Well, let's begin with the story. So, if you remember from the last video, the land of Egypt is now populated by both Egyptians and Israelites. Israelites are the children of Jacob, the children of Israel. And Israel, if you remember what it means, is those who struggle with God and men, right? Well, the children of Israel grew to be more mightier and stronger than the children of Egyptians. This actually threatened them. Well, now there is a new Pharaoh in town who has forgotten about what Joseph did for the land of Egypt. So, just to bring back your memory, Joseph actually predicted the famine that would inflict the land of Egypt and its inhabitants. Well, the new Pharaoh has forgotten about the favor done by Joseph, and he plans to subjugate the Israelites to tyranny. So he orders the midwives of the land of Egypt to kill off any Hebrew child, male child specifically, that's born. But as it turns out, the midwives do not do so. And this is really interesting for them to do, to go against the word of the Pharaoh, who is the tyrant. Let's say, who is so blinded by tyranny, he is willing to kill off every male child born into a Hebrew home. Every male child that's of an Israelite. Well, the midwives do not do that. And this is really interesting. The reason being, probably some things that you do on the order of the tyrant is not worth doing it, because probably at the end of the day it puts your consciousness at ease, because probably you don't recover from that. So for midwives it was exactly that, right? Killing off the male child. So basically the duty of a midwife is to bring a child into this world, but not to take the life away from the child. So they refused to go against their consciousness. So they made the best move that would put their consciousness at ease. Well, the Pharaoh finds this out and he orders for every male child in the land of Egypt to be killed off. Well, something can be learned from it. Just because you stand up to the tyrant and you refuse to obey them does not mean that everything is going to turn out correct, right for you. Well, what do you do? Well, does it mean that it's better to bow to the tyrant? I think not. Because in the long term, something comes into being. Well, if enough people stood up to the tyrant, the tyrant cannot stand for too long. Right? Even if you work in an office and if the manager is tyrannizing everyone, if enough people for a long enough period of time just went to the right people, contacted them, if they put their all the human efforts to get rid of the tyrant, I think they can. So probably not one person or a few people won't be enough, but on a long enough time frame, the action, the consequence that you're vying for does come into being. Because it's better than, because the alternate is bowing down to the tyrant for eternity. And I don't think that's going to work out too well for anyone. Well, one male child was saved and he was sent down the river in an ark made of bulrush. I think it's a plant. And the daughter of the Pharaoh finds him and raises as her own son. And she names him Moses. Well, Moses grows up and one day he finds an Egyptian beating a Hebrew That's the Israelite. So Moses looks around, he scopes out his surroundings, and he just goes ahead and kills off the Egyptian because he couldn't see his fellow man being beaten. And he thinks that no one has seen him, but that's not the case. People do see him and they report him to the tyrant. And this is really interesting. Just because you think that nobody is watching you does not mean that you're not gonna get caught. And it's a scary thing because what we do actually does not have to have a retaliation at that time. We don't really have to face a retaliation at that time, right? If you remember, for example, from Jacob's story, right? Jacob had betrayed his brother Esau so that he could get his father's blessings. But even though Jacob wasn't directly affected, his daughter Dinah, she was raped, and he lived for a long period in agony of losing his sons, even though he didn't, but he had to go through that agony. So probably if you are not directly affected, probably the way that you act, because just because you thought that you got away from it, so the person after that acts in such a way, thinks that they can get away with things, but that's not ever the case, because it is atomic, right? The thing that you experience, you thought, because now that's a part of you, that you think that you can get away with it, that's a part of you. You live in that belief. After doing something wrong, you think that you can get away with it, but that's not the case, because now it's a part of you, it's a behavior now, right? You think that you can get away with it, but you can't. In reality, you can't. And if when it comes to you versus the reality is always going to win. Well, moving ahead. Now, the Pharaoh is very angry with Moses, and Moses has to flee. And he actually ends up in another land where he saves a few women from the bullying of the shepherds. And one of the days, he is actually taking care of the flock of sheep on Mount Horeb. That's the god of, that is the mountain of God. And a flame comes down from a heaven and it lights up a bush nearby him. And the interesting thing about the burning bush is that the bush is burning, but it's not burning up. So basically, the bush itself is not disintegrating into ashes, but it's still on fire. That's divine in nature. That's why. And God speaks to Moses. He says, "Go and save the Israelites. I've heard their cries because of the tyranny of the Pharaoh and the Egyptians." Well, Moses wants to know God's name, and God says, "I am who I am." And I think that's exactly right, because how can you name God? Because if God is omnipresent and omnipotent, how can you name everything and anything? I can see 10 things in front of me that I can name. So I think that was a very profound answer by God. I am who I am. And he said to Moses, "I am has sent you to save you, to Israelites." Okay, now Moses wants to see how he can convince the Israelites to follow him out of Egypt. And Moses and right, and God says, "Tell the Israelites, I am has sent you." And that's enough. I am. That's it. I think the two words I and am. I am, if given enough emphasis, has a lot of power to it. I am who I am. I am has sent you. I think there's a lot of power to it if you say it the right way. I am. I am powerful. I am awesome. I am the most wonderful person. That's actually a call to a belief in you. That's it. I am has called you. and you got to answer, I am has sent you, and you better believe me. That is confidence. That is the divine confidence right there. Well, guys, it was nice talking with you, and I look forward to the next video the next week. I wish you guys all the best.